All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Sunday Futures. Folks, we are live. It is Sunday, February 22nd. We are heading into the last week of February. We are entering March after this week, which is kind of crazy. 2 months of the year basically have flown by. We are headed into the third month of the year. But not only are we heading into March, we have Nvidia earnings this week. Nvidia reports this week. It's a big one. Wednesday after the bell. We've got a lot to talk about in terms of what's been going on with Nvidia. I've been trying to go through the numbers on their earnings, the previous earnings and the future sort of projected guidance of earnings, basically all weekend, trying to understand the broader bull case for Nvidia. And, obviously I'm bullish, but I want to show some numbers to kind of quantify qualitatively and through the numbers why I think that bullish optimism is valid, but also recognize the harsh reality of the fact that we have some things going on in the geopolitical and macro ecosystem. Obviously, over the weekend, for those that have not heard about it, not only did the Supreme Court shut down the Trump tariffs, that was the big news on Friday, but Trump decided to institute a global 10% tariff in response to the Supreme Court rejecting his tariffs on a 6-3 decision. We'll talk more about what happened with the Supreme Court. He's invoking Section 122, 232, and 301 of multiple different trade acts in order to do that. And then on a nice little Saturday morning, you had Trump say, actually, I'm raising that global tariff rate from 10% to 15%. So we've got some things to talk about. Futures are red for those that are just joining by about 0.5%. They were flat for the first 30 minutes, and then they ended up going red because, well, I guess the market is not the happiest with a global 15% tariff. Although when you kind of look at the numbers empirically, it's not that different from what we had before. It's just, I think the markets were kind of excited the tariffs were going away. Now the tariffs are coming back. You have a lot of these countries hitting up the administration saying, hey, can we renegotiate? So we'll talk all about that later throughout the day. But yeah, that's why futures are red on your screen right there. It looks like, in my opinion, it would be because of these global 15% tariffs. On top of that, we have a lot of stuff to dive into, but the other big story over the weekend that I don't know how many people are familiar with, I honestly started digging into this literally over the past hour. One of the largest Mexican cartel leaders, El Mencho, was killed today in a joint military operation from the Mexican military and the United States military. This guy apparently, El Mencho, never heard of him before, but this guy apparently is like the most beloved figure in the Mexican cartel. I mean, he is like the guy. Like, he's the person that the Mexican cartel looks up to, protects, yada, yada. And so Mexico's not doing that well right now because the CJNG cartel is causing chaos across the entire country. There's some cities in particular that are getting hit the worst. I think Cabo is actually doing okay, but there's other cities that are getting hit bad. I'm not going to show all the videos, but there's a lot of stuff out there on X. This video you're seeing right here is a supermarket that's getting burned. They're burning it. They're just causing chaos. They just don't care. They're trying to send a message to the Mexican government that you can't mess with the Mexican cartel, and you especially can't get rid of the biggest force inside of the Mexican cartel, which is this El Mencho person. So, this is absolutely crazy. I don't know if it has that much of an impact on the broader market. It could have an impact on the market, but geopolitically, things in Mexico are not going the best. Bitcoin right there, 67,000. Fell just below 67, now rebounded 67,075. So, we'll see over the coming weeks if that has any implications. But yeah, Mexico's not looking like a good spot right now. And realistically, the entire cartel, if you do a little bit of research into it, was in bed with the police state, right? A lot of the Mencho henchmen were paying off the police and they were cooperating with the police. And, there was a lot of corruption within the Mexican police, but the military operation officially got rid of him today. And that cartel is just not happy. So we'll see a variety of different headlines coming together. Obviously, we got some stuff to talk about with Iran, which was the big headline on Friday. People thought there would be a strike over weekend. There has not been a strike. I think the tariff stuff kind of distracted the entire administration from maybe focusing on Iran over the weekend. But a variety of different things that are happening across the entire world. And then to top it all off, you do have Nvidia earnings on Wednesday, which is kind of holding up the stock market right now, even though the stock has been flat for the past 6 months. And we're going to need to see what happens on Wednesday to see where the market keeps going from there. All right, we got 9 minutes until the overnight markets open. When's the Tijuana meetup? Yeah, unfortunately, we are not doing the Mexico meetup for a while. We're gonna lay low on that. From some of these videos are really horrifying. I mean, like you got people literally. Let me show you guys this one video. This one is not as graphic, but there's a citizen journalist who's just walking around, kind of showing what's happening, and there's cars on fire. I mean, it is absolutely crazy how this is playing out.
This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth, coming at you here live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Just had the military driving past me, and as I understand it, I should not be around anywhere where the police or the military are, because they are the target right now. As you can see, this whole place is like deserted right now because there's burning cars back there, burning cars right here, still smoldering, and the situation is incredibly intense. As I'm sure you've already heard, there was a top drug lord cartel member, El Mencho, who has been killed. I believe there was a $15 million bounty on this man's head, and he is now dead. And that has caused this whole situation to pop off. The place looks like an absolute war zone right now.
It's pretty crazy. It's pretty freaking crazy what's going on in Mexico right now. So, I mean, we'll see if it has any broader implications across the entire markets. Obviously, I think a lot of people will be keeping an eye on Mexico, but yeah, the cartel is definitely pissed off, and they're taking it out on the streets of Mexico right now. All right, so 8 minutes until the overnight markets open. We have a ton of different things to discuss. I think in these 8 minutes before we get into some of the price action, let's talk about tariffs. Supreme Court struck it down 6-3. I mean, let me know in the chat what was your reaction to it. It was pretty crazy. I didn't think it would be 6-3. I thought it would be 5-4. Quite frankly, I didn't even think they would give a decision, and they gave a decision. And the craziest thing about this really is Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, the two people to the Supreme Court that Trump put on the Supreme Court back in 2017. He also had Brett Kavanaugh. Those all three were in his first term. Those two went against Trump, and Gorsuch just laid it down. He was like, to summarize what he said in his opinion, he was just like, if you want to put up tariffs, you got to go through democracy. You got to go through Congress. You got to go through something that finds a way to get it done in a non-abusive form of the IEPA exemption. And Gorsuch was like, I don't think it's our job as the Supreme Court to decide if tariffs are good or bad, but Congress has to get the job done. And he was like, I know it might be ineffective to go through Congress, but one man cannot have that much power. This is Trump's guy. This is Trump's guy saying, Trump, you are wielding your power to such an extent that is simply unconstitutional. And so it was quite incredible to see how that played out. And then Trump on Friday held a pretty aggressive press conference, and he basically said these Supreme Court justices are a disgrace to America based on their decision.
When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long. That I can assure you. The Democrats on the court are thrilled, but they will automatically vote no. They're an automatic no, just like in Congress. They're an automatic no. They're against anything that makes America strong, healthy, and great again. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to our nation, those justices. They're an automatic no matter how good a case you have. It's a no. You can't knock their loyalty. It's one thing you can do with some of our people.
It's kind of crazy, dude. Disgrace to our country. I mean, usually a president is not supposed to take such digs at the Supreme Court because they're supposed to be an apolitical institution. Nonetheless, the Supreme Court's obviously not necessarily intrinsically apolitical, but pretty aggressive words from Trump. You could tell he was definitely pissed off about what happened here. I did some digging over the weekend on previous presidents and their landmark policies that got challenged by the Supreme Court. The number one thing that popped up, which I'm sure a lot of people lived through and probably remember going through, is the Affordable Care Act. Obama got that passed in March of 2010. It was his landmark policy. One could argue that the 8 years he had in office, nothing was more influential than getting that ACA passed. Everything else that he tried to do after the ACA kind of led to like this Tea Party rebellion, too much government inside of our healthcare, and that kind of stalled him from being able to really get any other meaningful legislation passed that was as expansive or as significant as the ACA. In 2012, 2 years after that got passed, that got challenged by the Supreme Court, and on a 5-4 decision, they held up the ACA. So, I mean, we have had presidents in the past that have tried to have their entire presidency defined by one landmark piece of legislation, which obviously Trump spent the entire last year focusing on tariffs. And some of those presidents have had it granted. And the 2 other times that the Supreme Court tried to, or that a case tried to reject Obamacare, it also fell through. The latest one in 2021 fell on a 7-2 decision. So the ACA has now been validated and battle tested over the past 10, 12 years. Tariffs in the first year of being implemented in the way that Trump tried to get him through just did not have a chance to make it with this 6-3 decision. I really thought it would be 5-4, but 6-3 is pretty decisive. You know, if you can't get at least 5 of them on your side, it ends up getting hit. So Trump kind of crashed out over the weekend, and that led to the 15% tariffs. I don't know. I'm trying to do a bigger number or a bigger dive on the numbers around if this like 15% is that different from the current rate. So he's using multiple different levers in different sections to increase the tariffs. Now, there are certain levers that allow him to increase it to 50%. And there may be a world in which Trump comes out over the coming weeks and says, hey, I'm going to do 20% in total, right? Maybe it doesn't go all the way to 50, but he might increase them. And I think, you know, the 10% was intense on Friday, and he felt like he wasn't really getting the message out there. Or maybe his economist came to him and said, President Trump, for us to keep the revenues coming in that we were getting, which was almost $30 billion a month. I think the United States has collected about $175 billion since the inception of these tariffs. They're going to need to up the ante and make it like 15%. And so that's what he has now. He says this will be effective immediately, raising the 10% worldwide tariff on countries, many of which have been ripping the U.S. off for decades without retribution, to the fully allowed and legally tested 15% level. During the next short number of months, the Trump administration will determine and issue the new and legally permissible tariffs, which will continue our extraordinarily success process of making America great again. Yeah, 15% is the max for Section 122. I think these will also get challenged in court. You got a lot of people getting ready to sue the administration to get back the revenue that they lost in their business. Tons of small businesses getting ready. In fact, you have these things break over the weekend. Indian trade officials will postpone a trip to the U.S. aimed at finalizing their interim deal. This is from Bloomberg. The European Parliament's trade chief will propose freezing the ratification process of the European Union's trade deal with the U.S. A Japanese ruling party member over the weekend called the U.S. tariffs a real mess. That doesn't mean they're going to back out of the deal, but obviously you can tell how sentiment is. And then Australia's government said it will examine all options after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed a 15% tariff on foreign imports. So you got a lot of these partners that we made deals with kind of looking at their administration saying, hey, if we only made this deal because we were worried about tariffs, if that's not going to happen anymore, then maybe we have to reassess what's happening. We'll talk more about the tariffs after the opening overnight markets, which will open in 30 seconds, and then we'll keep going from there. We got a bunch of other AI headlines. Obviously, Nvidia we'll talk about. Yes, it is snowing hard in New Jersey. I didn't really think we would get that much snow. We ended up getting a decent chunk of snow. Schools are closed across New Jersey. Schools are closed across New York. Internet's good so far. If I don't go live tomorrow morning, it'll be because the internet went out, because the electricity went out. But yeah, I don't know. They're saying we're gonna get like 2 feet of snow. Hopefully it's not that bad. But if you're on the East Coast, it is a little ugly. And it was annoying because the snow was just starting to melt. Like it was literally just starting to melt. And now we got more snow. So this is what we're dealing with on the East Coast. All right, overnight markets are open. Let's see what we got. The S&P down 0.5%, 686.99. I'm going to guess Nvidia's at 186, 188. Okay, a little bit better than I thought. But down 1% on Nvidia. Nike down 0.5%. S&P down 0.5%. Amazon down 1%. Tesla down 1%. Microsoft 395, that's down. Meta, 1% down, 650. The Qs down 1%, 603. Critical rare metals, that's down 0.5%. Google down 0.5%. Grab doesn't really trade overnight. Elf does not trade overnight. Walmart down 0.33%. Robinhood, 74.98, that's down 1.4. SoFi, I mean, 1870. This one continues to get hit. It closed at 19 on Friday, down another 1.68%. Open Door is down 0.5%. IGV, which had massive inflows on Friday. We'll talk about that. That's down 0.5%. Salesforce is actually up a little bit. Also, we had some new news about Anthropic that will implicate CrowdStrike. Adobe's actually up a little bit. You guys will probably be really annoyed when you see this headline if you haven't. But CrowdStrike right there, there's a reason it was down 8% on Friday. There's another reason it's down 1.3% right now. BTC, are we tanking? Whoa, gap down on Bitcoin. Someone just sold a lot of it. By the way, gold is up 1.5%. Silver is up 5%. I think the geopolitical tensions around tariffs and potentially some of this Mexico stuff is gapping up gold and silver. So investors may be rushing to hard commodities right now as a potential sign or as a potential form of safety. Bitcoin immediately, that's like an $800 candle. No, that's more. That's $1,000 candle getting hit. Pretty ugly right there. Micron down 1.3. Lunar's down 0.5%. Redwire's down 2%. Caterpillar's down a little bit. D-Wave's down 2.34. Apple is down 0.5%. Where is the lab of rockets? Rocket Lab is down below 70. That's ugly. 3.64. The growth stocks are getting hit the worst. ASTS actually up. Weird that Rocket Lab's down. ASTS is up. Palantir's got to be down to like 130. Palantir 132. All right, so that's a little bit better, but that's down 2%. Nvidia 188 is not that bad, to be honest. Like Nvidia's literally been flat. If you look at the chart, it's literally been flat all year. I mean, it's quite incredible. I mean, it's moved a couple bucks here. I mean, there was one day it gapped down to 171, and then it kind of recovered the next day. But 188.33 on Nvidia. Verizon, of course, is up in the overnight markets as investors think that's safe. Domino's is up in the overnight markets. Intuit's actually up a little bit. Amcor is up a little bit. Apple is still down 1%. VG not having a horrible overnight markets. That's slightly flat. Nebius lost a lot of its momentum after getting to 108. Wow, Nebius down 3% overnight because of CoreWeave and Blue Owl. The headline was Blue Owl can't find a credit financier for CoreWeave's debt, which, I mean, look, I don't think it really affects Nebius, but the headline around the data centers is obviously not good if some of those data centers can't find a buyer for their debt. Iran, that's down 2.43%, now below 40. SoFi, are we at the low 18s? We are at 1862. What's the other one? CoreWeave, yeah, that one is, wow, 86, dude. Nvidia better pump CoreWeave on this earnings call, bro. They try so hard, and this thing can't stay up. That's down 3%. Iran, Nebius, CoreWeave down. What about Applied Digital? That is down 2%. Oracle is down 1.5. Oracle 145. Oracle, quite frankly, if you can look past their debt, their earnings growth, if you also believe the ROI on their CapEx, I mean, the multiples actually, it's definitely not as scary as it was at 350. And I don't even think it's that scary at 145, unless you think the debt is just not going to pay off. But man, for context, Oracle bottomed at 128 in April of last year. It's at 148. So, I mean, this is starting to get to those levels where things got really bad back in April. Micron's still down. SanDisk is still down. CopEx actually goes down. Weird. Is SLV up? Wow, that's the first time we're seeing a divergence between copper and silver. CopEx is the copper ETF. That's actually weird. I hope that's not a glitch. Usually, CopEx follows silver and gold easily. Silver's up 2% overnight. Gold is up. Huh. Part of the reason I think copper is down is because I did look at a couple of charts this weekend. Copper supply inventory is getting to like 2-decade level highs, which is kind of hurting the bull case for like this crazy copper demand. Because obviously, if the supply is as high as it is, yeah, there might be a lot of demand, but there's also a lot of supply, which means there's not that supply-demand imbalance. As you can see right there, copper stockpiles have doubled since September. Since 2024, inventories have soared 380%. I mean, maybe that's the reason it's diverging, but usually you do not see SLV and GLD go up and the copper miners go down. That is a little weird. All right, I think that's most of the overnight action. We'll get into a lot of the headlines we got to talk about. Everything's red. That's the headline. The 15% increased tariff by the Trump administration over the weekend probably is scaring markets. Now, again, things are not ugly. Stocks down 2-3% is a typical day for most of us in 2026. S&P is down 0.5%, so we did lose 689. We're at 685. Bitcoin, I don't know why Bitcoin's getting hit that. I feel like that's more Sunday algo shenanigans for this type of gap down. I mean, literally it was at 67 when we were starting the show, so that one got hit pretty bad. but BTC is down. Are you going to talk about Trump's demand that Netflix fires Susan Rice as DOJ probes Warner deal? Yeah, that was weird. Trump tweeted that I didn't know Susan Rice was on the board of Netflix, but Trump tweeted that he demands that Susan Rice be fired or quote unquote pay the consequences. So, yeah, I mean, Netflix, this is part of the reason I have not wanted to buy it. It's kind of stuck in this quagmire of navigating the politics of Trump and Paramount and all this stuff. He says she's got no talent or skills, purely a political hack. Her power is gone and will never be back. How much is she being paid? He then quoted Laura Loomer talking about how Netflix is woke. So yeah, that's what Trump said about Susan Rice. I don't know, Netflix. It is getting a little bit more attractive down here, but it is stuck in this political headwind with this Warner Brothers deal. Netflix right there down about 1% of the pre-market. If you do own Netflix, it's something you're gonna have to cover or stay on top of. I don't think Netflix will actually fire a board member, but if they really think the only way to get Warner Brothers is they got to fire a board member, who knows? Who knows how Netflix is gonna end up playing this out. Wow, China earthquake networks report a 7 magnitude quake in the waters off one of their islands. Oh boy. China earthquake. Let me search that up real quick. Then we'll get into the headlines. China earthquake. 7.0 magnitude's pretty heavy. 7 yeah, wow. It's a massive one. China Earthquake Network Center reported 7.0 magnitude earthquake off Kalimantan Island. Oh no, but this is not in China. This is in Indonesia. This is not in China. It's just the China earthquake networks are reporting. Oh, so this is Indonesia. This is not in China itself. Huh. It's off the coast of Malaysia. That's right. All right. We'll stay updated on that. See what happens from there. You got so many headlines going back and forth, dude. So many things going back and forth. Yeah. All right. We'll keep updated on that throughout the hour and see what else happens from there. Okay. Let's get into the headlines for what we got going this week. We'll obviously talk about Nvidia, but let's get updated on what's going on with tariffs. Bessent had some things to say this morning about the world of tariffs. Let's bring it up and start discussing it. Obviously, the administration is trying to do some damage control right here to explain why their tariffs need to happen. Here's the first thing Bessent said about paying back the money.
Refund the roughly $134 billion in revenue taken by these emergency tariffs.
Well, Dana, that's not the big.
Hold on real quick. Bitcoin. Oh my goodness. This is kind of ugly. 65.5. That's another $800 in 5 minutes. Hood surprisingly only down 2%. MicroStrategy's got to be dumping. MicroStrategy is down 3. BMNR is probably down 4. ETH has got to be what, 1800? ETH is 1872. Someone's dumping crypto. Someone's dumping crypto. 65.45. We'll keep an eye on that. That one's looking kind of ugly.
Question. Let's just level set here. What the Supreme Court did was a very narrow reading of the president's authority under the IEEPA tariffs. We have other tariff authorities which have been functioning, Section 232 tariffs, Section 301 tariffs. And Dana, when you say it's a big question, that's bad framing because the Supreme Court didn't even address that. The Supreme Court remanded it down to a lower court. And, you know, we will follow what they say, but that could be weeks or months when we hear them. So the Supreme Court did not address refunds.
Sure, they didn't address refunds. That is clearly going to be up to you, which is why
no, Dana, it is not up to me. It is
not you.
It is not up to the administration. It is up to the lower court. Let's just be clear on that.
Okay. Well, the Justice Department told a federal appeals court in this very case last year, if tariffs imposed on plaintiffs during these appeals are ultimately held unlawful, then the government will issue refunds to plaintiffs.
Again, I'm not going to get out ahead of the court. We will follow the court's direction, but as I said, that could be weeks or months away. That decision was not rendered on Friday.
Okay, and then here's the other clip of Bessent talking about what the Supreme Court exactly said.
The Supreme Court said is that the president cannot use the IEPA, the
Right.
Emergency Economic Powers Act, to do this. The president does have other authorities, and as I said, the Section 232 tariffs and the Section 301 tariffs have withstood more than 4,000 lawsuits. So it was very narrow, and it's very interesting that the Supreme Court said that the president can't raise $1 of revenue with tariffs, but he can put on a full embargo. So they reaffirmed his ability to block all trade. He just cannot accept $1 for the trade. And I will tell you, like the tariff revenues, they have come into the Treasury. But more importantly, the ultimate goal of tariffs is rebalancing trade and bringing our trade deficits into balance. We've seen our
Now, obviously, Bessent is trying to justify that the tariffs are still legal. The weirdest thing about this for me, while Bitcoin continues to dump, is that if they knew that IEPA wouldn't be the right way to implement these tariffs, why didn't they use these sections that they're now scrambling to use back in February of last year? Obviously, there were some issues with the legal nuances. For example, only 15% for Section 122, only up to 150 days for a couple of these sections. Like, there were some parameters that didn't make the implementation of the tariffs, or the threat of the implementation of the tariffs that they were using to bargain / negotiate with all these counterparties, meaningful, which is why they went through IEPA. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court says 6-3, IEPA is not the way you're allowed to implement this stuff. So they're going back to the previous ways they probably thought of using, but realized were inferior. And now it just looks like the administration's doing it from a weak perspective, no matter how much they claim that the tariffs are still going to be effective. Because if they were going to legally use these justifications back in February of last year, they would have done it. But they didn't, because obviously there were issues to implement them based on the previous trade acts that they come from. So the question is going to be with these tariffs, how much does the EU buy into these ideas? How much does India, South Korea, Japan, Australia, how much do they think, oh yeah, the administration is legit in using the sections that they're using? Or do their lawyers look at these sections and say, no, the U.S. doesn't have a chance of actually meaningfully using this as a form of negotiating tactics? And as a result, maybe this tariff saga continues. And it would kind of suck for the administration. Bitcoin right there, 65.5, bounced off 65.2. If the entire second year of Trump's second term is characterized by trying to force the tariff issue and legally justify it within courts over the next year. As you can see right here, the EU is the biggest source of imports. Bloomberg reported over the weekend, the EU may freeze U.S. trade deal approval on Trump tariff, quote unquote, chaos. So, I mean, you're just seeing a variety of different things play out right here around the tariffs. And, we don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but it's obviously not looking the best for the way Trump implemented them. Now, maybe this ends up being a nothing burger and the tariffs get to stay through and the current revenue comes in the way the current revenue comes in, but there's a lot more questions than answers. Here's a trade representative, Jamison Greer, on how he argued for why the tariffs are good.
The 15% tariffs, of course, will expire at the end of July. That's about 3 months before the midterm. So what does President Trump do at the end of that period with midterms looming that have to be on his mind? He comes out and extends it. He comes out and announces more. This is not popular with the American people. In our latest poll, 2/3 of Americans are not happy with the tariffs.
Well, the president's been campaigning on tariffs and protecting American industry for many years. And he does what he says. He delivers on his promises. And so the policy hasn't changed. The legal tool to implement it, that might change, but the policy hasn't changed. And so we're aiming for continuity. There's a 15% tariff now.
That doesn't make any sense. The policy hasn't changed, but the legal tool to implement the policy has changed. If the legal tool implicates the policy, of course it's changed. She just asked what happens in July because the legal tool you're using expires in 3 months. Like, what are we talking about here? Of course the policy has changed if the justification for how to implement the policy has fundamentally changed. So again, it's just not that convincing.
It's roughly equivalent to the types of tariffs that we had in place under IEEPA. As this tool expires, I'm going to be conducting Section 301 investigations. The Commerce Department has existing tariffs under Section 232. A lot of tariffs are still in place. The reality is we want to maintain the policy we have as much continuity as possible, make sure that business understands this is the direction we've been going. We're going to continue going this.
So, I mean, again, he didn't answer the question. The question was, hey, what happens in July when the tariffs run out? And he said, well, the tariffs are the same. It's like, and I don't blame Jameson Greer either. He probably doesn't have an answer to the question because he knows, like, hey, we're in a little bit of a pickle here. Bitcoin continuing to face weakness, 65,389. But as you can see, I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I'm really not sure how this tariff situation ends up playing out. My gut tells me the worst thing that could happen here is that countries renege and Trump tries to like have a different deal, but still be seen as the guy who's getting the upper hand on the deal. And, maybe they have to lower some of the tariffs, but they get more investment. Trump's not going to want to seem like the loser here. And so if there is a massive renegotiation, then I think Trump is still going to try to squeeze something out of our counterparties. The other question is, do these countries want to piss off Trump to the point where he could do something more dramatic than tariffs in a variety of different tools that the United States has to piss off, their leaders, right? Like, I don't think the Japanese prime minister, who just got a massive endorsement from Trump, necessarily wants to renege on the deal just because the tariff policy changed, because obviously, Trump might not be the happiest about that. So there is a world in which I think some countries respond to this, other countries don't. But the question is, in a midterm year, are we really going to be going back and forth on tariffs when they weren't that popular last year? And is that going to be the defining characteristic of what the Trump administration is campaigning on towards the end of the year? By the way, the tariffs are not fully helping our trade deficit. U.S. trade deficit in 2025, one of the largest since 1960. The gap narrowed just slightly last year to $901 billion. So as the courts continue to review more and more of what's going on with the tariffs, as we have to potentially repay $175 billion, which, by the way, my mom asked me this over the weekend. She was like, so what about the money that we paid? My mom's not the most up to date on economics, but even she could understand, hey, tariffs probably increased prices and I probably paid higher prices on goods and services. She was like, hey, do I get any of that money back? And I was like, no. Walmart's not going to issue you a refund for charging you higher prices. So that's not happening. Now, maybe some businesses will be able to get some of their money back for, suing the administration and trying to get some more tariffs. But at the end of the day, the $175 billion the U.S. collected, I don't know how much of that is exactly from individual consumers or how much was passed on to individual consumers, but up to $133 billion in refunds, we're likely not getting that. Also, those $2,000 tariff dividends, yeah, I don't know if that's happening either. By the way, I wasn't the biggest critic of tariffs. I actually thought the tariffs were a form of negotiating and leverage that was meaningfully creating some resemblance of reciprocity against countries like India that were tariffing our alcohol by 90%. Like it actually was a really meaningful way for Trump to get countries to come to the negotiating table and then actually talk. And like, we can't have our semiconductors and our pharmaceuticals and all of our defense gear always be manufactured in places like China. Like, we do need to bring some of that back to the United States. It's just the legal execution on how they implemented it ended up being a disaster, even if the concept of it was not horrible. And so, yes, there is a critique of tariffs. There is plenty of reasons why the tariffs are bad. I think there are some reasons, if we're being objective, why the tariffs were strong and like important to help get more investments into the country. But the president's legal execution of it didn't work out. At least the Supreme Court didn't think it worked out. And now we are having to deal with the ramifications of what's going to happen. Bitcoin, she is very close to losing 65. Losing 65,131. We are going to see if this one goes below. I don't know who's dumping it here, but someone is. Copper. I don't think it's a glitch, guys. Very weird that copper, for the first time in months, is diverging from silver. Silver's up almost 3%. Copper's not. Usually they go together. CoreWeave's down 3. SoFi is down. Oracle is down. IREN is down. Palantir is down. HOOD's down. Rocket Lab's down. ASTS is down. Crypto is the one really taking it on the chin today. Ethereum, 1870. Let's see where the pain stops for Bitcoin. If it does stop, $2,800 candle. $2,800 candle on BTC. All right. We got to talk about AI because I think that's most of the content around tariffs. We'll talk more about it tomorrow, but the TLDR is 15% global tariff. We'll see how the administration legally justifies it. Questions about the trade deficit, questions about refunds. All those are looming with no answers, but hopefully we'll be able to move past it soon instead of having to deal with this for the long term. Now, these are the macro events that we have to deal with this week. Obviously, we got Nvidia on Wednesday. We have consumer confidence on February or tomorrow on Tuesday for the cumulative month of February. Then we have obviously the market open tomorrow. We're going to see how the markets react to the 15% global tariff. Initial jobless claims on Thursday. We actually get January PPI data because a lot of it has been delayed on Friday. And then we have a bunch of Fed speak happening this week. So if the Fed speakers say anything that resembles wanting to raise rates, which for some reason they were talking about last week, that could also have an impact on the market. Wow, probability for that March cut, 4%. 4 freaking percent. At least it was at 6% on Friday. It's gone down over the weekend. It looks very unlikely that we're going to get that rate cut. Having said that, let's talk about Nvidia. So let's do the first Nvidia pump or dump poll in the chat. We're going to have many of these pump or dump polls. I'll be live on Wednesday with Tanner, Jose, Neil, and probably a couple other people. 3:30 p.m. Eastern, we'll be live. 4 p.m. we will get the earnings for Nvidia. Nvidia pump or dump. What do people think? I spent a decent chunk of time going through the numbers over the weekend. And I am bullish, obviously, but I'm going to try to present both sides and kind of see what's playing out right there. Nvidia is down 0.5%, 188.40. Meta is down about 1%, and Amazon is also down about 1%. So let's talk about Nvidia. Let's talk about Nvidia. JP Murray, thank you for the $200 super chat. Deeply appreciate that. If the Supreme Court shut down tariffs, that's cool, but then what is their way of paying off the debt? Taxing the rich, sure, but there's a great quote. The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. You know, I mean, it's a fair perspective. The tariffs were being pitched, and again, thank you for the super chat. It's very kind of you. The tariffs were being pitched as a way to help reduce our deficit or at least pay off our debt. That was at least the idealistic utopian version of it. You know, without those tariffs, we're going to have to get the money from somewhere, which brings up the broader question of like, you know, how is the United States going to resolve the issues of our debt? There was a study that came out over the weekend that by 2045, we're expected to have $64 trillion of debt, almost doubling what we have right now. I don't know. I don't know how this plays out. I don't know how the tariffs are going to be implicated. I don't know what the current tax policy is going to be. I don't know if we have a midterm switch from Republicans to Democrats, how that's going to play out in terms of tax policies. Well, one thing I think I am certain of is that when these AI companies start printing these like 95% margins because of how much AI has commoditized labor, the government's going to want to tax the crap out of it. I think that's inevitable. But as of now, I do not have a solution to our debt problem, our deficit problem, and the courts have just obviously made this a lot more complicated. All right, so Nvidia, let's talk about it. A couple of headlines this week that I think are really important to talk about Nvidia. First of all, we need to acknowledge the reality of Nvidia's multiple. Right now, Nvidia trades at 40 times trailing 12 months earnings. If you look out into the future on what Nvidia trades at, or at least what the analyst expectation is, it's $7.76 for the next fiscal year, which means if you take the stock price, 190 divided by 776, you get a 24x forward multiple. One could argue that's relatively cheap, but you don't have to trust me by saying, in my own opinionated bias, that 24 times earnings is cheap. We can use the data. We can use the math. What does the math say? Nvidia's 5-year average on their PE is 38. Right now it's trading at 24. So historically, this has been the cheapest. I'm sure there's been other moments where Nvidia was even cheaper than this, but as the momentum has gotten higher, as the growth has gotten better, the 5-year average is well above what Nvidia has historically traded at. Obviously, if you take that 38 times forward earnings and multiply it times the EPS metric, you get a stock price of $294. No one's asking to give you 38 times 2027 earnings, but you know, even if you were to get 30 times, you're going to get a number that is much higher than where the stock is today, which objectively says to me that the stock is likely undervalued. So what are the core questions around Nvidia this week? I think there's 5 of them. Number one, do you believe that inference is going to be a bigger and bigger story across the world in the age of LLMs, and obviously how LLMs are expanding from just not only being able to give you the answer, but infer how the answer will be happening from each of the different pinpoints that it uses to actually come up with some type of meaningful response, deep reasoning, etc., that makes them really sticky and really usable. By the way, we have some new metrics on ChatGPT and user retention, which just shows that LLMs are absolutely scaling. It's the biggest consumer product in history, when we talk about the retention on LLM. So we'll go through some of those charts as well. The second question is, how large can physical AI become? Robotics. Are robotics going to usher in the next billion GPUs that NVIDIA sells one day? NVIDIA's moat around custom ASICs. This brings up the question around Broadcom, TPUs. Can NVIDIA survive? Do they have the supply chains? Do they have the ability to really penetrate the market without having their margins be commoditized away? And then finally, if CapEx will continue to grow over the coming years. I think the biggest question right here is CapEx, even though it shouldn't be the question, right? Because all the hyperscalers already came out and told us that CapEx is not slowing down and it's actually going to be better than expected. By the way, there's the chart right there. AI retention rates you can see on ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, and DeepSeek. I mean, these rates are pushing 70%. Like, consumer products have never had these types of average retention rates. And obviously, these are the story of our lifetime in terms of how LLMs are changing the entire world. So this all flows back to NVIDIA at the end of the day, and all of these LLMs need more CapEx. All of the hyperscalers that are deploying these LLMs via cloud infrastructure also need to increase their CapEx. The street is projecting guidance for NVIDIA at 28% for the next fiscal year. More analysts that I read over the weekend, Bitcoin getting ready to lose 65, she hasn't left it yet, $40 away, are thinking that number is going to come in at 40%. If that number comes in at 40%, over 28%, basically call it 30%, that is a serious divide between how the street is expecting NVIDIA. That's like, I think it's like another, if I'm not wrong, $70 to $80 billion of revenue that the street is discounting, because the street might believe it's possible, but they're not trying to bake it into their guidance or bake it into their multiples. And NVIDIA doesn't necessarily give that type of guidance, but NVIDIA will hint at it. And when NVIDIA hints at it, that's when I think the stock could really make a re-rating move in the overnight market or in the after hours after Jensen talks. But you're going to need one of those statements like $500 billion in 5 quarters, which is what the CFO Colette said back at GTC. By the way, in January, Colette said that $500 billion in 5 quarters projection had increased materially. For anyone who missed that quote, they were at like this Barclays conference and they were like, yeah, that whole $500 billion in 5 quarters thing, we are going to do a lot more than that. China revenue is still a tailwind, right? The H200s have not been sold yet to China. That still could add another $20 billion a year to NVIDIA's top line. And then we talked about TSM earnings 3 weeks ago. The CapEx projections were $14 billion more than expected. TSM is making the chips for NVIDIA. If they're increasing CapEx, obviously they are getting a lot of demand from NVIDIA, which means NVIDIA is getting a lot of demand from their customers, which means the sort of estimates that the street has might be materially weaker than what NVIDIA is going to come out with. Then you have this over the weekend. Martin Shkreli posted this. This was showing Lambda's API NVIDIA launch instance rates. And as you can see, it's all sold out. It's all sold out. I mean, you're just not able to rent any GPUs, even for an hour, to be able to deploy them on whatever surface that you're trying to deploy it on. And so, this is just another anecdotal piece of evidence that shows that demand is not slowing down. If anything, demand is going up dramatically. The question is, will the market actually buy into that thesis for NVIDIA, even after Jensen says it? Now, the street's expecting 65 billion. The whisper number is like 66. I think NVIDIA is probably going to come out with 67.5. And then the guide, street's expecting 73. NVIDIA's probably come out with 75 billion. I mean, every metric, gross margins probably still in the mid-70s. Everything they need to do to make sure they are showing that this is not slowing down, I think they will do. It is up to the street based on the macro, and then I guess based on the optimism that these algorithms have on NVIDIA to be able to execute to this North Star of what they can become, if they believe it. I'm a believer in it. However, it would not surprise me if NVIDIA falls back to about 180, 185, maybe even 175 on earnings, not because it has bad earnings, just because this thing has been range bound. It has been absolutely range bound. It hasn't done much. This has been the chart for the entire year. It topped out at 194, went all the way down to 171, and it's been stuck at around 189. I don't think it's crazy for NVIDIA to be flat. I think the implied move is like 8%, but there's not really a reason for NVIDIA to get hit badly on earnings outside of them like saying something that would break the thesis. And you just have more than enough evidence based on what all these other AI companies are saying, all the other CEOs of the AI companies are saying, and then what Jensen himself has said in CES for you to think the earnings would be bad. I mean, he in Taiwan, we played multiple clips of him saying we have more demand than we can handle. Like, we are trying to get these GPUs as fast as we can. And then he got this over the weekend, which I thought was also really important for Nvidia. Yeah, it's only up 27% since September 2024. But I also think, as annoying as it is that the stock has really barely moved, the opportunity for this to explode is just there, simply because of the fact that, you know, the stock has barely moved and it's gotten cheaper as the growth hasn't improved. OpenAI, the information reported, is now projecting 282 billion of revenue by 2030. So they are raising their revenue forecast by 27%. They want to do about 67 billion in 2027 after they've tripled revenue to 13 billion from last year. Their weekly active users have now hit 910 million. They're about 90 million away from 1 billion weekly active users, while enterprise revenue is set to more than triple to 8 billion this year in 2026 as OpenAI pushes deeper into corporate AI tools. Now, there was another headline that came over the weekend that OpenAI's 1.4 trillion CapEx number that has been seen as like the, you know, the boogeyman of the entire AI industry, because Brad Gerstner asked Sam this question about the 1.4 trillion and Sam got upset. That number is now 620 billion. That number is now 620 billion. However, there was an investor from a VC fund that responded to this headline on X over the weekend. I think he's from Coastal Ventures, and the dude has been at Coastal for a long time. It's one of the best VC firms in Ethan Choi in San Francisco, and they've been early investors in OpenAI. His response to this was actually that the headline is very misconstruing. The argument is that OpenAI was never going to spend 1.4 trillion. They were always going to spend 600 billion. The other 800 billion, he wrote right here, was going to come from its partners. I don't know if that's a cop-out or if he knows more than me. Obviously, his fund has been invested in OpenAI for a long time. They probably have much better information around the state of the company than I do. But his argument was that this is false reporting. It was always 600 billion by OpenAI. The other 800 billion was supposed to come from somewhere else. I wish he had told Brad Gerstner that, because on that pod, when Gerstner said, hey, you know, Sam, you're going to spend 1.4 trillion. Do you have the money? Maybe if he said, hey, you're going to spend 600 billion. Do you have the money? Sam wouldn't have gotten so pissed off and caused all this pain. So nonetheless, the point is, it looks like OpenAI is going to be able to capitalize. They're going to be able to get the money they need. This $100 billion funding round should be closing, I think, in the next 2 weeks is what I've read. And if that's the case, OpenAI should have the money. That's good for Oracle, good for Broadcom, good for AMD, good for Nvidia. Nvidia is also putting in 30 billion in this round, reportedly. So OpenAI should have the money. They should be good for it. And if they can just keep, I mean, if they're going to do freaking 280 billion in revenue by what, 2030, I mean, that's kind of crazy, dude. At that point, they're kind of cheap. If they trade at 850 billion, if you use 2030's price to sales, they trade at 3-4 times sales. I mean, they're probably still going to be losing money, but I mean, can they actually grow at that level? And if they're doing that much money, how much is Google doing? How much is Microsoft doing? How much is Meta doing? How much is Anthropic doing? I mean, all these companies, if OpenAI is able to grow at that scale, are probably going to be growing as well, which is why I think the broader bear case on this being an entire bubble that's going to epically collapse in front of us, and it's going to be .com 2.0. I mean, let's do a poll in the chat as well about that, because you had Michael Burry over the weekend once again stating that Nvidia will collapse. It's a bubble. The hyperscalers are spending way too much money. They don't have the ROI to justify any of this. And he, once again, is taking the position that this is going to be the .com bubble 2.0. I mean, how many people agree with that? 55% of you, by the way, say pump over dump in the Nvidia poll. Will AI turn into .com bubble 2.0? Meaning, just like Cisco, Nvidia falls 70-80%. I mean, it's possible. Anything's possible. It's just, once again, if the trajectory of ROI continues to go in the right direction, and we are using every GPU we can possibly use, I don't know if it happens as dramatically as he says, and I don't know if it happens as quickly as he says he's projecting it to happen by like the end of next year. By the way, memory continues to be crazy. Look at these prices for DRAM chips. Once again, it's going higher and higher. You had multiple reports come out over the weekend around Micron and SanDisk continuing to be the single best plays in the stock market, given the multiple they trade at. Remember, their multiple is lower than Nvidia's, and their growth is higher than Nvidia's. One of the reasons their multiple is lower is because of the cyclicality of the business. But you got JP Morgan defending the stock, $500 price target on, or I think $450 on Micron, saying this party's not stopping. It's not stopping at all. And that's also leading a lot of people to get excited about Korea. So we talked about this last week. Ticker symbol EWY is how you get exposure to Korea. And as you can see, Korean chip makers trade at a steep discount to global peers. The majority of EWY as an ETF is Samsung and SK Hynix. So if you're buying this ETF, if you're buying Korea, and obviously the numbers look pretty phenomenal in terms of the forward price to earnings, price to book. The forward PE of Samsung and SK Hynix are 8.7. The global tech average is 19. You're buying the fastest growing companies trading at less than half of global tech PEs. But there's a reason they trade at half. And the reason, once again, is people are afraid that memory is cyclical. People are afraid, quite frankly, just like this chart that came out about copper that I showed you guys, that copper supply is going up. And for the first time, I think in months, copper is actually red when silver is green. If that happens one day, which again, a lot of the institutional research suggests that the memory supply is like, it's not getting any better, which is really good for the memory companies. But if that were to happen, copper finally turned green right there, just slightly, then that would be completely ruining the thesis. And who knows, maybe that does happen. But my take on this is very simple. Like, if you believe that memory is in this massive super cycle and HBM is so undervalued given the amount of supply versus demand, that's got to be bullish Nvidia, because the only reason you're having this memory super cycle is because of AI demand, and AI demand goes back to Nvidia. So like, it's one of those things where you could maybe sleep well at night buying Nvidia instead of having to buy the memory names, although the memory names might have a lot more alpha. I mean, SanDisk is up 150% this year. Micron's up 40% this year. Nvidia's up nothing this year. But I think eventually it comes back to Nvidia. And if that's the case, then hopefully Nvidia has a good earnings. Pun intended says, I'm at the airport in Korea right now waiting for my flight. I hope you have a safe flight. And the Korean ETF is racking up a lot of assets as EWY continues to be a popular forum to park money. Now, granted, I don't know if the trade has already happened. I mean, again, the ETF is up 38% this year. This might be one of those things that you buy into strength, but also, like, dude, it's up 40% in 2 months. Who knows? Maybe the money rotates right back into the big tech names that simply haven't made that move after they continue to put up really good earnings. And that's the confusing part about this market, right? It's like S&P's flat, big tech is flat, if not down. Nvidia is not making a move, but you have investors that are happy to give the Korean market more of their capital because of the growth rates that they're seeing, while not giving the capital to the companies and the industries and the sectors that are fueling the growth of what is essentially memory, which is, without Samsung and SK Hynix, this ETF would not be up 40% this year. And so I think there's a lot of nuances to this, but it does feel like Nvidia is going to be okay. In a bear market, Nvidia could go to 15 PE in a second. 100% in a bear market that could happen. I mean, in a bear market, which is defined as 20% down on the S&P, all these stocks are getting absolutely destroyed. Question becomes, once again, what gets us into that bear market? And, quite frankly, what might get us there is one of the biggest private companies in the world that's worth $380 billion. Because on Friday, well, they said, introducing Claude Security, now in limited research preview. It scans code bases for vulnerabilities and suggests targeted software patches for human review, allowing teams to find and fix issues that traditional tools often miss. And as soon as that happened, this video got 25 million views. CrowdStrike went down. It's like, it is getting comical now. You thought cybersecurity was safe. Like, I think Dan Ives was on CNBC on Wednesday, and he was like, AI will not kill cybersecurity. He was like, literally, it's like he wanted to pound the table by saying that AI will be advantageous to cybersecurity. And then Claude's like, yeah, so we're doing some stuff with cybersecurity, to the point where George Kurtz, the CEO of CrowdStrike, this is what he tweeted today. Can AI replace security platforms? I asked Claude to build a CrowdStrike replacement. Claude responded, I have to be straightforward. Building a replacement for CrowdStrike isn't something I can do here. CrowdStrike is a massive platform built by thousands of engineers over a decade plus, yada, 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 yada. And then George Kurtz says, if you want to create AI, you need GPUs. If you want to deploy AI, you need security. That's not a hallucination. It's a fact. So even George Kurtz is like, guys, like, do you need me to ask Claude if it can replace me? Like, what do you need me to do to get you guys to believe that just because they introduce a code-based security prototype, that does not mean that endpoint security that is doing $5 billion a year in revenue at CrowdStrike is going out of business? Market doesn't care. Market doesn't care. And you can tell that Anthropic's kind of loving it. Like, Anthropic is loving the attention that they're getting of just like single-handedly saying, we're going after CRM, we're going after security, we're going after this. I mean, because the narrative on Anthropic is that they are absolutely wrecking every single SaaS company. IGV, again, had record flows. It's down another 1% right here on Friday. So, retail continues to buy the dip on software. But I think they're loving the fact that they are being perceived as the company that's going to win every level of application layer in enterprise software, which, by the way, they kind of have to. Like LLMs, take a look at the SaaS apocalypse chart right here. LLMs becoming an API layer to the majority of our day-to-day lives is not going to turn Anthropic or OpenAI into a multi-trillion-dollar company. Like, it's just not. They have to win the application layer. And the application layer might be something like a CRM, might be something like a UiPath robotic processing automation, might be a DevOps platform, might be an agentic commerce via Shopify, might be a team management platform like Atlassian, like it might be a UI platform in design like Figma. Like, maybe these AI companies are deciding they want to go for the throat of the application layer, because if they just become an API that the applications pay money to, they're going to make money, but they're not going to own everything. And if you own the entire stack end to end, which I don't think that's as easy to do, to be honest, I think it's actually very difficult. But the market's kind of saying it is kind of easy. So going back to the question, what if we get into a bear market? I mean, maybe Anthropic causes the bear market. I'm being a little facetious there, even though I still can't say that damn word. But if it were to happen, it might be because AI is too good, which would honestly be crazy. Which gets into an article that went viral over the weekend. Every week I have a new article to show you guys that go viral. Citrini Research, which is a popular Substack that puts out some relatively good macro research and individual stock research, they put out an article for free. I'll link it right here if anyone wants to read it. I did not read the entire thing. I read a little bit of it. But it's kind of interesting. They put out an article from the perspective of June 30th, 2028. And the entire argument's premise, I'll link it right here in the chat, was the idea that AI becomes so good that unemployment prints at 10%, that the S&P draws down 40% from its October 2026 highs, that people have lost a purpose in life, that they don't know what to do anymore, that the race for productivity has created margins that are so monumental for these tech companies that they are now being taxed. It goes into the whole universal basic income conversation at an incredible rate because people don't have money, because AI is so good that it took away all sorts of consumer demand and spending, because again, people don't have jobs. And it did not usher us into this utopian world that Elon is talking about. It put us into a nightmare. It's doomer sensationalism. Actually the article, so it's definitely doomer sensationalism to an extent, but the article tries to very explicitly say, this is not what we think is going to happen. This is just one of many different diverse perspectives of something that could happen. And quite frankly, I think it's reasonable to project a world in which AI becomes, because we're literally seeing it in software, that AI is so good that the software companies are being priced as if they're going to zero. I mean, if they're so good that the software companies are going to go to zero, why can't AI be so good from a philosophical perspective that jobs, theoretically, in terms of new job rate of growth, goes to zero? Now, again, the optimistic perspective is that jobs will grow in abundance and everything will be happy and great and we'll have more jobs than ever. But I mean, there is a counter perspective to that. And yeah, obviously, if people don't have jobs, the S&P would be down 40, 50% because companies might not be able to have the best earnings. I mean, Starbucks is not going to easily sell their $7 coffee if people don't have the money to spend on it. And so from that perspective, the actual takeaway from the article, if you read through the entire thing, is buy Nvidia. like the article's perspective is you have to be long the company that's like ushering in this revolution. But it's also like, if you buy Nvidia and your Nvidia stock goes up, does it really matter if the entire economy collapses? Like, no, not really, right? So it's more of a prediction that everything goes to shit, even if AI ends up becoming amazing. And I think people are already feeling this to an extent. I mean, as portfolios have taken a hit, you can tell people are becoming a little bit more cautious on their spend. They might not easily go out and spend as much money as they were spending when, you know, their stocks were at an all-time high. And that's something that Trump touched on last week at one of his conferences. If the market were to continue falling, that $9 trillion that he said he's entered into your 401ks, you know, if that starts to take a dip, then people might not be spending as easily. And then you take that to its logical extreme, but people lose their jobs, which the job growth numbers have not been that good so far in 2025. That could also be another macro issue we have to deal with. Having said all of that, the broader argument, I think, this week is that Nvidia is going to crush it. Maybe we're going to have issues with Nvidia in a couple of years. I don't think those issues are in 2026. I don't think Nvidia trades at a premium in which you can say it's a bubble like Cisco did or Microsoft did back in 2000, 2001. And as a result, it feels like Nvidia is appropriately priced. And if it stays flat and the, you know, forward multiple goes from 24 to like 10 or 20, that's too aggressive, 24 to like 18, and the stock just doesn't do anything, I mean, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, because that allows us to get even cheaper Nvidia. And eventually I think the market does price that in. If not, then the market's going a whole different direction this year, and we'll evaluate after Nvidia earnings. But I think this is the quarter that people are expecting it to make a move. Did we lose 65? We lost 65. We lost 65. You're probably right in it, but the stock will dump. I think there's a world Nvidia pumps to 210 and then dumps to 190 the next day. So I agree with you. I think we can go through that roller coaster we went through last time, where we went up to 190, came down to 170. Now, I don't know if we come back all the way to 170, but I do think there's a world we pump and then we dump back to the levels that we were at before earnings. And, you know, maybe that's ultimately how this plays out. Wow, Bitcoin really getting wrecked right here, 64.701. Now, remember, the lows we saw last week were, not last week, like 3 weeks ago, were 60. Like we hit 60 on the dot, right? 60,279. Some of you guys might have a different number, but 60,279. We're $4,500 away from getting back there. I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen, but it is Sunday, and Sunday tends to be a bit volatile. Hoodie is 74.50. MicroStrategy is 126. ETH's at 1868. S&P, yeah, still down 0.67, 684.98, as that one is down. All right, so that's what we got in regards to AI. There's a couple of other things I wanted to show as well around what's happening with Nvidia and some of this AI stuff. Let's see if I can pull up a couple of these things. We also had some other macro headlines that are probably going to be important this week as well. Are gold and silver still pumping? Gold and silver are actually doing very well. Gold up 2, silver up 6. Does gold and silver continue, I guess, to be seen as a form of safety in the midst of everything we have going on? All right, so Mamdani just issued a state of emergency for New York City. Travel ban is beginning at 9 p.m. I would imagine a lot more people in the Northeast are seeing. I mean, let me know in the chat if you're in the Northeast and it's snowing hard. I really didn't think it was going to be that bad, because yesterday was almost 50 degrees. Yesterday was amazing. I was walking outside. I was like, dude, we're not getting no freaking snowstorm. And then by like 2 p.m. today, yeah, we ended up getting a snowstorm. So I guess we're going to have to see how we navigate that on the Northeast. Manny, thanks for the super chat. Our Bitcoin earnings tomorrow. Unfortunately, Bitcoin earnings are not tomorrow at this point. Bitcoin earnings would be nice, because maybe there would be something to give us some momentum, but no, I think the market's just getting hit to get hit. The tariff stuff might not be the best for it. All right, a couple clips on Sam Altman. Here's what he said about Elon's GPU data center in space, which potentially could impact the narrative of SpaceX if this is to be the prevailing narrative. Here's what he said over the weekend.
There's another space race, but that I keep hearing about.
I honestly think the idea with the current landscape of putting data centers in space is ridiculous. It will make sense someday. But if you just do like the very rough math of launch costs relative to the cost of power we can do on Earth, to say nothing of how you're going to fix a broken GPU in space, and they do break a lot still, unfortunately, we are not there yet. There will come a time. Space is great for a lot of things. Orbital data centers are not something that's going to matter at scale this decade.
This is another space race, but
if Sam's right about that narrative, that orbital space data centers are not going to matter this decade, which is what, the next 4 or 5 years, I think the narrative on the SpaceX IPO, which quite frankly is hinging on space-based data centers, is going to come into question. Now, obviously, Elon has a very large megaphone with his Twitter audience, and he can fight to change the narrative. And JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs that are underwriting the IPO, they're probably going to pitch that narrative as well. But it's one of those things where either that's the narrative or not. And maybe that's the narrative that pumps it, but that's also the narrative when it doesn't come to fruition is what dumps it. I don't know. I'm not an expert on space-based data centers, but it's going to really be that narrative, I think, that defines what happens with the SpaceX IPO. And then here's another clip by Sam Altman, which I thought was interesting as well.
One of the things that is always unfair in this comparison is people talk about how much energy it takes to train an AI model relative to how much it costs a human to do one inference query. But it also takes a lot of energy to train a human. It takes like 20 years of life and all of the food you eat during that time before you get smart. And not only that, it took like the very widespread evolution of the 100 billion people that have ever lived and learned not to get eaten by predators and learned how to like figure out science and whatever to produce you. And then you took whatever you took. So the fair comparison is if you ask ChatGPT a question, how much energy does it take once its model is trained to answer that question versus a human? And probably AI has already caught up on an energy efficiency basis measured that way. One of the things that is always...
I thought that was kind of interesting. So kind of comparing it to a human and how much energy it takes to raise a human. Definitely a different perspective, to say the least. But that was one of the clips that went viral as well. And then here's the last one about Sam Altman saying AGI is coming very close.
I mean, AGI feels pretty close at this point. Okay. Like if you had to ask...
The audio on this is really bad. Let me try to get another one right here. But yeah, here's a better clip right there. But this was his take on where he thinks AGI is going to be coming for.
AGI feels pretty close at this point.
Okay.
Like if you had asked me, I think if you had asked most people 6 years ago, what would you think if we had systems that could do new research on their own? What would you think if we had systems that could make an entire complex computer program on their own, that could do pretty sophisticated knowledge work in all these different fields? You know, you could have one system that could act as an AI doctor, lawyer, computer scientist. We would say, okay, that sounds pretty general and pretty intelligent. We get used to it, whatever we have, but just watching how much the technology we already have is accelerating us internally, I would say it's pretty close. And given what I now expect to be a faster takeoff, I think superintelligence is not that far off.
Now, again, if it is pretty close, that means that Nvidia is going higher. Like if AGI is a couple of years away, which I don't even know how you would necessarily define AGI, but if it is this super massive intelligence that is just going to get bigger and better, you're going to need a lot of compute for that as Bitcoin continues to puke. Can someone get Bitcoin some GPUs? Can we get some energy into Bitcoin, please? That would be nice. But that $280 billion projection from OpenAI, if they get anywhere near to close to that, I mean, I can't imagine how much revenue Nvidia is going to be doing in 2030. So it's one of those arguments where whether you like the guy or not, if he's right about the growth potential and if multiple companies are competing for it, then all of those are going to have to buy more Nvidia. Wow. Who do you guys think is selling BTC? I see a bunch of people saying the Mexican cartels are selling Bitcoin. Maybe. Maybe they decided to take out their anger on Bitcoin today. 67% of you say no, AI will not turn into a dot-com bubble. I guess in a few years, we're going to see if we have the answer to that question. Iran is selling for sure. Oh, so speaking of Iran, we did have an update on them. Their foreign minister once again said today they are ready to talk with the United States and they are in good participation with working with the United States. It's kind of going the opposite of all those headlines we had on, I think it was Wednesday of last week I mean, it's not really the opposite. It was more so those military headlines of the United States getting ready to strike, even though we didn't strike. But the headlines weren't necessarily wrong that the United States was increasing their military presence. Those were correct. It's just the statements we got today were a bit different. Now, having said that, The biggest issue right here, and I believe they'll be in Geneva soon talking in Switzerland, one of the high-ranking U.S. officials said, if Iran proposes a nuclear deal, negotiations will take place on the 27th of February. With a deadline within 48 hours, according to U.S. media reports. Now, here's the thing. Iran has said multiple times, they even said this on Friday before the market closed, that like, we are ready to talk with the U.S. We want to talk with the U.S. We're not afraid of talking with the U.S. Like, we're open to, but we are not giving up our nuclear ambitions. And I think part of the reason why Trump even explicitly said that I think he was on Air Force One on Friday, and he said, yeah, we are, he said, I guess you can say I'm considering, I think was the exact phrase, a strike, is because that's the number one priority of the U.S. is to make them stop their nuclear ambitions. Now, we struck their nuclear program in May of 2025. Based on how Trump is talking, it's almost like that didn't do anything, because it's like the administration is actually really scared that they're getting close to a nuclear weapon, which means that there might have to be a deeper attempt militarily or some level of deeper diplomacy to try to get these guys to stop it. But I mean, if Obama couldn't negotiate the Iran nuclear deal back in 2015 to get them to stop, I don't think Trump's going to do it. And I think the only approach, if they say no, we're going to keep doing what we want to do, is go in militarily. Now, is that the right decision? I have no idea. But if the only objective is to get them to not have a nuclear weapon, I don't think they're going to agree to anything in a diplomatic manner, so that's another sort of broad-based headwind that the market has to deal with. Again, I don't think it's the worst thing for the market, but it is something that we're going to have to navigate if this ends up being uglier than not. Are we still tanking on Bitcoin? Getting a little bounce off 64.4 after falling 3,700 points. A little $200 bounce is at least somewhat nice to see, but man, this is ugly. Very, very, very ugly for BTC. Again, I wonder who's dunking right here. I wonder who's dumping the asset. So that's what we had with Iran. Take a look at a couple of these macro charts. Data center spending set to overtake office spend in 2026. As you can see, the building boom for data center construction is really strong. We had some headlines on Stargate. Stargate, again, was that OpenAI Oracle SoftBank project that was like supposed to result in 10 gigawatts of AI infrastructure. Yeah, the update over the weekend is that nothing has happened. The information said the Stargate joint venture between OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank hasn't staffed up and isn't building OpenAI's data centers. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means nothing has happened. And, well, maybe Elon did say a long time ago, they don't have the money. I mean, maybe Elon ends up being right. Now, granted, OpenAI is going to get the money soon. A lot of that money coming from Oracle and SoftBank. But the question is going to be, are they just using the money they're getting from these investors in this latest funding round to then start Stargate, which is not exactly, remember, the Stargate project was a new company. It's an entirely new company, which intends to invest $500 billion over the next 5 years to build AI infrastructure. That was announced back in January of last year. We haven't seen anything from that. It's been a year. So again, more questions than answers on how this is going to play out. The most important thing, though, I think to remember, though, about this compute narrative, and Jensen said this a couple of days ago, if these companies had more compute, they would be increasing their revenue by a magnitude of what they're doing right now. And if you believe that if they had more compute, they could sell more AI, whether it's subscriptions, services, ads, implementing new business models, more enterprise adoption, whatever it may be, then that means compute is the bottleneck. It is not the headwind towards AI success long-term. But I think the bears obviously would think that, this is Michael Burry's entire thesis, that compute is not a bottleneck. It is the reason why these companies are going to crash by 40, 50%, because they're building out and they're spending too much compute. As you can see right here on this chart, the tech sector is now cheaper than consumer discretionary, industrials, and staples. Tech has never been this cheap, but it is. And the reason it's this cheap is because I think of that bear narrative, which is that these guys are spending way too much money. They're cooking their free cash flow. They don't need to spend all this money. They're not going to get the ROI, and it's all going to go up in flames. I disagree with that. I think you kind of have to disagree with that if you're bullish on the broader AI sector. I think a lot of the evidence points to a disagreement of that. But it's that narrative versus the optimistic narrative on how AI ends up playing out. Only some of tech is cheap. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there's obviously tech names that are not necessarily cheap. But those Mac 7 names, I wouldn't say Apple's cheap, but the typical Mac 7 names that people talk about, Amazon, Nvidia, Microsoft. Microsoft, goodness gracious, they have absolutely demolished this name. Took it to the woodshed here. Microsoft, $395. They have not even kind of let it get any momentum. So that's what we got, folks. That is what we got across the entire market. Oil prices are slightly down right now. The main headline is that we got Nvidia earnings, and the tariff increase is obviously what's upsetting markets right now. I don't know if it'll have that much of an impact on Nvidia, but it is continuing to have more and more of an impact on the market. A couple other charts right here. You can see software's forward PE versus the S&P 500, the lowest in basically 20 years. Either Anthropic's going to kill all these companies, or this is a DeepSeek moment for software. And, the more you dig into it, yes, you think software is cheap, but man, it makes you think twice before you buy software when you see some of the stuff Anthropic's doing and their ambition behind it. And it's not Anthropic in particular, but it's this idea that the AI companies want to control the application layer. And if they want to control the application layer, they're not going to stop. They're going to be ruthless at going after the snowflakes of the world and the paths of the world. And if that's the case, then those companies are going to have to really execute against the AI companies in trying to win for the enterprise. Also, this chart I forgot to show, the U.S. housing market was not good on Friday when we got those new homes data. Pending home sales also fell to the lowest level ever recorded. By the way, that spike up in 2020 is crazy. When those rates were 3%, everyone was trying to buy a house. And now, as you can see, rates are more than double, and it's ugly. So, yeah, we got a housing market that needs to open up. You got a tech sector that's what I would say is undervalued. You've got Nvidia earnings coming this week. You got global tariffs continuing to increase. You got an earthquake that happened in Indonesia just now. You have chaos in Mexico as one of the biggest cartel leaders has been killed. And you got the S&P down almost 1%. It's getting the worst it's ever been in the overnight markets right here, down 0.71 based on these headlines. Are you buying Bitcoin? Well, who's buying Bitcoin? Put in the chat. I think I have enough exposure to Bitcoin. Just like I said 2 years ago, I think Hood is my exposure. And Hood has been a decent form of exposure, up and down. So, now granted, one of my goals this year was to DCA into Bitcoin and the S&P. I haven't done either. I was supposed to buy both every month. It's only been 2 months, but that was the goal, and that is not what I've done. I see more people saying no than yes. Dude, this is when you're supposed to buy, though, right? This is when, when the sentiment is so bad. This is when it's like, all right, it's supposed to take a shot at it. And I think Bitcoin will be fine long term. I do think, though, this qualifies as crypto winter, right? We're officially in crypto winter. Maybe it bottoms out by March. By the way, I want to show you guys something. There's this guy I found on X, and I just want to show you his prediction for this year. But I also want to show you his prediction for 2025, because my goodness, was his prediction accurate? What cash to buy Bitcoin? That's a good question. Did I save his tweet? Yes, I have. Okay, so look at this guy's, bro. This shit was crazy. This guy's been doing, I don't know what he's been doing. He's an anonymous account on X, but this is what he tweeted on January 2025. Current thesis: ugly into March, April, low 20%. He got that right. We went down 20%. Forming a head and shoulders, getting everyone bearish, then rip higher with 2 5% drawdowns in the back half of the year. He got that right. October and November. End of year calling for about an 18% year. He also got that right. I mean, talk about a prediction that came almost exactly true before it all happened. This is his prediction for 2026. January starts out choppy. Volatility will be up. Market will be up. That happened. But mostly we spin our wheels into February. That also happened. With lows tested, we grind to a new all-time high into May, where you sell and go away into a 14% drawdown. That's actually very similar to Tom Lee's thesis. And all the bears will come out calling for the gap below to fill. It doesn't. And then we start a second 1/2 rally around midterms, ending the year up 15% at 78.53. I mean, so far he's been right. We've been going up. We're chopping in February. I mean, I kind of personally agree that we're like more in a bottom than not, at least in the short term, just because of how bad sentiment is anecdotally, how bad sentiment is on AI, how much Nvidia has barely moved. Microsoft's down 20% to start the year. Like, you're telling me we're going to get into a bear market and Microsoft is down 20%? Like, that doesn't happen. Usually Microsoft's up 20% or a lot more before it hits the fan, which is exactly what happened on the soybean tweet of October 10th. Everyone was basically at all-time highs. That's when shit crashes, not when people are down 10, 15% to start the year. Now, anything could happen, right? It's a midterm year thing. But the point is, I think we probably do get a drawdown this year. I don't know if it's at this level. And I think it's not crazy to say, yeah, we probably gap up a bit. You let the market buy into Nvidia, and the earnings will continue to get rewarded, but eventually we have to rip the Band-Aid off and take that 10% haircut, maybe more. And then it kind of lines up with Jason's thesis as well. Jason's TA kind of tells him by October, November, we bottom, and that's when you buy the dip heavily. That would be very similar to 2022. Midterm year and bottoming around Thanksgiving time, which is exactly what happened in 2022. Obviously, things could change. Trump could announce 50% tariffs. Who knows what happens? But I do think at these levels of a lot of these stocks, I mean, if they're going to take Amazon to 150, okay, but they already took it down so much, maybe it doesn't have to go back down to those levels. His bottom is 6,200, though. Quite a ways to go. Yeah. I mean, now again, he's saying that's going to happen a while from now. Which, look, if you're actively managing your portfolio, obviously rotating and selling some stuff before that happens, it always feels good. But in reality, sometimes you got to just hold through the pain and keep going from there. But if you're leveraged, if you're on margin, if you have options, that's when this stuff is really useful, because those things can't survive those types of events, right? Shares can survive it because your shares will be fine as long as the company doesn't go out of business. But your options get nuked. So if you're levered up into like June calls on a stock and we crash in May, it's not going to be the easiest to recover. But again, one perspective out of many perspectives that are out there. Ethereum 1860, BTC, we have not lost 64. We have not lost 64. I didn't watch the Iced Coffee Hour. I know they got our boy Camillo up there. Camillo is a good friend. Let's go to the take, because you're saying he had some good words on Anthropic. And let's see what he had to say. Let's see. He's obviously very bullish Amazon, which is owning a 20% stake in Anthropic. So I think he's excited about that as well. Okay, let's see if I can find this. Yeah, all right. Let's play this from here. Bitcoin 64.67 right now.
Agentic AI stack. So today, Anthropic has put out something that they call a cowork, right? And Anthropic cowork essentially gives you the ability not just to run a prompt, but to actually have numerous agents. It's like having a multitude of employees, and you simply tell it what you want to do, and it will have 5, 6, 7 agents. One will be running a marketing department, one will be running a tech stack for you, and it will piece together all the things that it needs to piece together in order to accomplish any task or any goal that you have. And it will work 24 hours a day, right? So it's not just like putting in a prompt and waiting for an answer and then copy and pasting and doing it the way we've been doing it through ChatGPT the last couple of years. Now, there is another way to do this, which I think most people are adopting the last couple of weeks, and you've probably heard of OpenClaw, right? It's gone through a few different naming changes, but this is essentially the same thing, except it's open source. It's not run by a big model. And because it's open source, it's completely free. So everyone's going out right now and buying Mac Minis, and they're basically running OpenClaw, and you don't have to be a technologist to do this. Anyone in the world can do this really easily. You just simply tell it, hey.
Has anyone used OpenClaw yet? I have not sat down and actually used it. I want to build an agent soon to like really kind of get into the nitty gritty of it. But let me know in the chat if you've used it. It's obviously gone super viral, and people are building their own agents and starting to see progress with it.
I want to start this business. How do I do this? What do I need to do? And you set up OpenClaw with its own email account. You set it up with its own social media accounts. You set it up with its own credit card if you want, with its own limits. It's its own person, and it runs on a Mac Mini. And the reason why you want to run it on a Mac Mini is because it's new and because it's open source. So the safety standards aren't really there yet. So it becomes an employee. And in fact, it can become an employee that's managing 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 employees, because it will create other agents inside of itself to do an infinite number of things. So it will actually run a business for you from A to Z on its own. And that's what's been happening the
How is
last
that
2 weeks.
possible? To me, that just doesn't seem feasible, that you could tell it this idea, like, I want to make this app that does this, do it. That it'll actually go and like make the app and put it on the app store and charge your card for it. And like, how?
Graham, it's doing all of it. I know this is why I haven't slept in 2 weeks. I mean, this is why I initially missed the first, when we were supposed to be doing the show a couple of days ago, and I just didn't even realize, because my life is this crazy. I can't keep up with the technology the last couple of weeks. So, what I do as an investor, I essentially spend 4 hours a day dissecting thousands and thousands of comments on videos to try to surface change in the world, right? Cultural shifts, consumer behavioral shifts. And then I try to connect the dots of that change to investable opportunities in the stock market. And that's what a social arb trader does. That's what I've been doing for 18 years. There are a lot of people that follow me, obviously. And there are at least 6 people that I know of in the last week that have set up OpenClaw boxes and said, I want you to replicate everything that Chris Camillo does. And a few of these people have actually put the results and have shown it working on X. And it works 24 hours a day doing everything that I do. So it actually goes into TikTok and it starts watching videos. It runs through comments. It knows what words to look for.
So it's like your personal assistant, and you prompt it to do things that you would be doing. Okay. I guess that's kind of like, so if you give it access to your calendar and I can see the use cases for it, but the fact that it's actually effectively doing it by itself, I guess, is why it's been going so viral, if it has been effective.
It knows to look for words like sold out everywhere, obsessed. So it understands my methodology, and it knows what to search for on TikTok. And then it scans comments and it evaluates what's trending in real time. And then it extrapolates what might be a good investment to make. This was done in 48 hours. They basically replicated 18 years of my work in 48 hours on a Mac Mini, just voice prompting, hey, can you replicate what Chris Camillo does? It researched me, and then it started a company, and it started doing this in real time. And so I'm just one very niche individual with a niche business, right? It can do this for any business in the world. In fact, like this is the most exciting piece of this, in that I'm calling it like the Great Reset. Okay. And I'm so excited for it, because there's so much negativity around AI right now. Everything that you just talked about, with so much of the benefit of AI getting concentrated to one class of people, it doesn't have to be that way. This is the first time in my lifetime where the future is not necessarily owned by those with the most credentials or the most money or the best education. It's owned by anyone in the world that's willing to adopt quickly and create.
Well, that is the broader bull case for AI in general. Again, I have to go deeper down the rabbit hole of OpenClaw. The founder of OpenClaw did get a massive offer from OpenAI. And I think part of the reason is because if Camillo is saying what he's accurately describing, which is that he told a OpenClaw agent to just replicate what he does for a living without even telling it what to do. They just researched who Chris Camillo is, knows that he's a social arb trader, and started doing what he would do, which is like reading a lot of comments and like analyzing it. Then obviously that's pretty damn cool. Now, I'm sure it has to go through a lot of renditions, and that's probably why OpenAI bought them. Claude threatened to sue the guy because originally it was called ClaudeBot. And so you do have a difference in opinion from Anthropic and OpenAI towards this. But like that's kind of what we're looking for, right? In this AI future, we're looking for Siri to just do everything for us. We're looking for our, who knows, our glasses maybe, to like be an orchestration layer that does what we need to do throughout the day without us having to touch a screen to do it. And I don't know if that's the form factor it plays out in, but that's where sort of the human productivity levels should be a lot more massive than what we're expecting. And obviously it's probably not as easy as I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but I mean, the thing has gone completely viral and it got OpenAI's attention to acquire the company as soon as it ended up came out. Siri can only set a timer. Yes, that's right. Siri can only set a timer. But Siri just asked me for how long do you want the timer. But hopefully that timer can become a lot more than that. By the way, White House just tweeted, the United States provided intelligence support to the Mexican government in order to assist with an operation to kill El Mencho. Last year, President Trump rightfully designated the JNGCL as a foreign terrorist organization because that's exactly what it is. In this operation, 3 additional cartel members were killed, 3 were wounded, and 3 were arrested. Well, now I get the Mac Mini jokes that have been coming out because, like, I've been seeing it all over my timeline. I don't know why it was going to, but now I get it. I didn't know it only runs on a Mac Mini. I'm sure that'll change eventually, but yeah, I guess that's why people have been. Look at these jokes. I've got 4 Mac Minis now. Tell me how to make money. This is crazy. Do you think it was Palantir for this Mexico thing? I don't know. All I know is this thing was kind of crazy. And to give some context here, take a look at this audio recording that has gone viral. This is from 2016. It's in Spanish. El Mencho ordering a police officer to relax his officers, and the police officer complies. That's how much power this guy had over the Mexican police.
Delta 1. Hey, ¿quién habla? Mira bien, hijo de tu puta madre. Soy Mencho, güey. Relaja tu puta.
He is going to curse a lot in Spanish. So if you have kids around that know how to speak Spanish, there's some cursing here.
Gente a la verga. Soy Mencho, güey. Relaja tus putas partidas, si no te voy a partir tu madre, tienes toda tu bola de perros. Te tengo identificado 30 güeyes. Hasta tus putos perros te voy a matar si no te relajas, güey. ¿Cómo ves? Ya está, señor. Ahorita los bajo.
And then boom, you got it, sir. I'll tell the police squads to fall back. I mean, it's kind of crazy, bro. No, sir, I'm not hanging up. I was just saying I'll let them know. And he says, get your stuff together. And the police officer is like, well, I'm trying my best. I'll tell them to back off. I mean, the fact that this happened in 2016 just shows how much power this guy, and obviously you can tell right there because he's giving them a ton of money. And so they paid off the police, very corrupt. It's probably why the military wants to get rid of this guy. But this was from 10 years ago, so that's 10 years. No, sir, we won't have any more problems. I mean, they're treating this guy like he's the president of Mexico. So the fact that he got hit today, I think, is what has freaked out the cartel, and that's why they've just gone crazy. We got a China headline. China Commerce Ministry says U.S. unilateral measures such as reciprocal tariffs and fentanyl tariffs violate international trade rules, and U.S. domestic law are not in the interest of any party. China Commerce Ministry on U.S. Supreme Court tariff ruling. China urges the U.S. to lift its unilateral tariffs on trading partners. China will firmly defend Chinese interests. Well, there you go. The Chinese are awake. It is 10:19 a.m. in China, and they are officially calling on the United States to take off those tariffs that are now deemed illegal as per the Supreme Court. And you know, the Trump administration literally has to. They can't leave them. The Supreme Court is the highest court of the land. There is no other court you can go to. That's it. 6-3, you're done. The only thing the Trump administration can do is call the Commerce Ministry and say, we are instituting a new set of tariffs under Section 122 or 301 or 232, whatever section they use, to be able to then implement the justification for why the previous tariffs theoretically are going to still be intact. Having said that, the Commerce Ministry of China is going to be like, interesting. Let's have a talk about that. And so are the Europeans, and so are the Japanese, and so are the South Koreans. I mean, definitely to a lesser extent than China, but The Chinese are not just going to be like, oh, you're going to use a different section to tariff us? Cool. Yeah, we're going to comply. They're going to be like, no, we got to talk about this. First of all, this section only lets you do 15%. Second of all, this section only goes for 150 days. Third of all, Bob, and then it's going to, like, if his second year ends up becoming, once again, a fight for tariffs, my goodness, dude. My freaking goodness. Or they could go down to Congress and actually do their job. Well, the problem is, I mean, they only have, what? It's like 53 senators in the 53. How many Republican senators? It's 53, right? 53, yeah. They need 2/3 majority, and none of the Democrats are going to vote for these tariffs. And I mean, the second year of they're definitely not voting in a midterm. There is no way in hell they're going to get, what do they need? 7+. They're going to get 14 Democrats in a midterm year to pass legal IEEPA-oriented tariffs. First of all, it would take months to do that. If they were going to do that, they were going to do that last year. It would take a year to even get it passed. Second of all, the Democrats are not voting. That would be a win for Trump. They're not going to give him a win that easily. Just like in 2013, 2014, the Republicans basically stopped every single type of policy legislation that Obama wanted to pass because he already got the ACA done. They thought that was enough overreach. And Obama basically became a lame duck for a second term. I mean, the guy really was not able to do anything with a split Congress. That's why the midterms are so important. And there's no way in hell the Democrats are going to give Trump that big of a win by voting for his tariffs. I mean, they weren't going to do it last year anyway, which is why Trump went through this whole executive order. It just ended up, not being legal. It's crazy, dude. Absolutely. I mean, Friday was, I really didn't expect it to be 6-3. I thought he would get more of the conservative justices. And then when you see what Neil Gorsuch said, let me pull up what he said exactly. Because, bro, he basically gave Trump a middle finger. He was like, you really tried to be a king. And that's not how this works. Now, Kavanaugh went the other direction. And Kavanaugh was like, this is going to be horrible for national security. But, regardless, it was quite incredible to see the change in perspectives from the Supreme Court justices, both of them appointed by Trump. Here's what he said. Here's what Gorsuch said. He said, for those who think it is important for the nation to impose more tariffs, I understand that today's decision will be disappointing. All I can offer them is that most major decisions affecting the rights and responsibilities of the American people, including the duty to pay taxes and tariffs, are funneled through the legislative process for a reason. Yes, legislating can be hard and take time. And yes, it can be tempting to bypass Congress when some pressing problem arises. But the deliberative nature of the legislative process was the whole point of its design. This is why a lot of countries across the world don't have a legislative process because, shit is really slow when you have to get 2/3 of a Congress to vote on something. Through that process, the nation can tap the combined wisdom of the people elected representatives, not just the faction of one man. There, deliberation tempers impulse and compromise hammers disagreements into workable solutions. And because laws must earn such broad support to survive the legislative process, they tend to endure, allowing ordinary people to plan their lives in ways they cannot when the rules shift from day to day. Basically, he said the tariffs were so quick that most people got blindsided by them because there wasn't a democratic process to allow the legislative process to take place. In all, the legislative process helps ensure each of us has a stake in the laws that govern us in the nation's future. For some today, the weight of those virtues is apparent. For others, it may not be so obvious, but if history is any guide, the tables will turn and the day will come when those disappointed by today's result will appreciate the legislative process for the bulwark of liberty that it is. Very constitutional sort of spirit by Justice Gorsuch, making the argument that you got to go through Congress if you want to get things passed. It just obviously was not what Trump wanted to hear. And again, 2012, right? 2012 was when the Supreme Court ended up holding up the decision for Obamacare on a 5-2 vote. This is a little bit of a blast from the past. A 5-4 vote. If this 5-4 vote didn't happen, we would not have Obamacare. And take a look at the logic behind how the Supreme Court ended up passing this.
Generation on healthcare affecting every single American, and Georgia
It is President Obama's signature legislation, and the Supreme Court has upheld the requirement that every American buy health insurance. We want to go straight to ABC's Terry Moran at the Supreme Court.
Well, George, we just got the opinion. I'm just taking a quick look at it. It's very long and a very brief look at it. couple of things. The court says we are ruling in this case. They had a chance to punt. They didn't. The second thing is that Chief Justice Roberts says that the individual mandate is not a valid exercise of congressional power under the necessary and proper Commerce Clause. In other words, they struck down the individual mandate under the Commerce Clause, but then he goes on to say the individual mandate may be upheld within Congress's power under the taxing clause. In other words, very complicated, the court says that government can't insist that you purchase insurance, but it can tax you more if you don't.
So Terry, they're saying basically it's giving you a choice. You don't have to buy the insurance. You can pay the tax, and that's why it's constitutional.
On the first 30 seconds of looking at this opinion, that's my take. It's like flood insurance. The government doesn't mandate that people who build homes on floodplains buy insurance, but they tax people differently who have insurance.
And Terry,
they provide
so back in 2012, the conversation was that Obamacare was going to be deemed illegal by the Supreme Court under the Commerce Act. The Supreme Court said, yeah, Obamacare and like forcing people to buy healthcare is probably illegal under the Commerce Act. But because the inability to purchase healthcare changed the taxes, so the penalty essentially was a tax, the Supreme Court, 5 of the justices agreed that it's very similar to the example he just mentioned around flood insurance, which is that you have a choice. It's not violating your personal rights to get healthcare, because if you don't get it, you're allowed to not get it. You just end up getting taxed differently, which is very similar in other parts of American life where, you know, if you choose not to do something, if you don't have a property, you don't have to pay property taxes. But if you do buy a property, you do have to pay taxes, right? So that's how it's a very, like, one could argue, a minuscule way of defining an entire healthcare plan. But 5 justices came together against 4 and said, this is the route we're going. I think we could have easily seen a 5-4 for Trump if he had, you know, somewhat, or if the Supreme Court justices would rather use the clause around national security, which is what Kavanaugh and Alito and Thomas were using. But he needed to get 3 of them to be on his side, or 2 of them. And the 2 that he needed, because he wasn't going to get Roberts. I mean, he could have got Roberts, but he probably wasn't. He wasn't getting the liberals. He needed Gorsuch and Barrett, and they went the opposite direction. So, I mean, this could have been a totally different conversation. 5-4 for Trump, and would have been very similar to Obamacare's 5-4, even if people didn't agree with the 5-4, but it ended up being 6-3 against him. And I think it definitely changes the trajectory of this entire presidency now. And so we're all going to see eventually how this ends up playing out. All right, folks, I think that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Bitcoin, ugly $3,000 candle to the downside. Mexico continues to be in trouble. And China, there are your statements from the Chinese Commerce Ministry. They are ready to officially start renegotiating, I guess, with the United States based on the quotes that we're seeing right now around the Supreme Court. What a weekend, dude. What a freaking month. We're coming towards the end of the month. What a freaking month. I mean, February is supposed to be an ugly month. S&P's flat this month. A lot of other stocks are down, but Nvidia reports on the 3rd to last day of February. Hopefully that report culminates in a decent end to this month. But if it doesn't, it would be in line for February sucking as always. And maybe March we get a little bit of rebound. Zoflo says, I'm in Mexico City and it's safe here. Zoflo, I'm happy you're safe. I know in other parts of Mexico, like Cabo, I've heard is okay. Other parts have been, I mean, just these videos are absolutely insane, some of the stuff that we're seeing. And hopefully this gets under control. But yeah, you got a lot of geopolitical headwinds and the natural disaster stuff that's happening coming through. And then you got the tariffs. Which I don't know how it's going to play out. Any updates on Singapore meetup? Okay, yes. So this is not the official date, but this is definitely closer to the official date. Singapore meetup is going to be happening end of June, most likely that last week of June, probably on a Saturday, June 27th. That is not the official date, but based on the meetings I have this weekend, yeah, we're going from April to June. June makes more sense. April, we were planning during a holiday weekend, so it would be a little dicey for a lot of people because of the holidays. But the last week of June, that Friday or Saturday, 26th or 27th, I will have the link up for everybody probably in a week so people can sign up. LA meetup is officially live, March 28th. There is the link right there. We have about 50% of the spots that got taken up. So again, if you want to come through, very excited for it. Chris just told me today that he's probably going to be there. Steve's going to be there. Matt's going to be there. We have a lot of the mods that were in New York that are going to be there. Sam's going to be there. So I think it's going to be a fun time. The link to the hotel, if anyone wants to stay for a discounted rate, is in that Eventbrite. And if it's not working, just email Jess at AKComms and we'll make sure you get a discounted link. But yeah, very excited for this one. March 28th, Culver City. It's going to be in a hotel. So if you're staying at the hotel, the event will be in a hotel. And it'll be 6 to 12 on Saturday. So very excited for that. So the meetup schedule is LA March 28th. April, there's a break. May, Chicago. We'll have more details on that. May 30th, we're likely planning for Chicago. June, Singapore. July, there's a break. August, the UK, tentative. September, there's a break. October, we're thinking Miami. November, we're thinking Austin. And that's how we end out the year. That's how we end out the year. So it should be fun. Should be fun. It'll be hot and humid in Singapore. Yeah. It's just Singapore, honestly, like based on, because I'm going to be going with a couple family members and we kind of want a vacation in Singapore as well. So it makes the most sense with that. Also, like it'd make no sense to do Singapore in April because Miami or LA's in March. So like doing Singapore right after LA, just a little tough. You know, we need at least a month in between to kind of reset. By the way, Trump's going to be having the State of the Union on Thursday. That's going to be must-see TV because you know who sits at the front of the I just gave it away, of the State of the Union? The Supreme Court justices. They sit at the very front of the State of the Union. That's on Thursday, right? That's after Nvidia? I think that's after. Yeah, that's after Nvidia. So he's going to be talking about tariffs. I wonder if he's going to look those Supreme Court justices and say, you guys are a disgrace to America, which I think is kind of, that's, he can feel that way, but you know, you're not supposed to say that to the Supreme Court. I mean, we've had presidential, candidates and administration officials who have voiced anger at the Supreme Court, but disgrace to America is like, it's a little aggressive. I wonder if on the public stage he actually says that. And then he's going to be talking about his tariffs, and he's going to try to win the narrative that the tariffs are still in place and nothing changed. But yeah, things did change. And so that Supreme, that State of the Union with the Supreme Court in front of it. Yeah, I'm probably going to, I think I have to stream that, dude. That's going to be crazy. So Thursday night. Oh, it's Tuesday. Oh, it's before Nvidia? I thought it was the 26th. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's before Nvidia, February 24th. All right, Tuesday night. We'll be streaming that live. Did Palantir get another $1 billion deal? Yes, they did. We didn't cover this on Friday because I think this came out like after hours on Friday, but Palantir got $1 billion from the DHS. Palantir got $1 billion from the DHS. So it's a 5-year contract. And they got that on Friday night. I also had an interview with someone on Friday, which is why I missed the market close. For those that follow me on Instagram, you know who I interviewed. As you can see right there, DHS opens a $1 billion tab with Palantir, 5 years, $200 million per year. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I'll put my Instagram in the description or in the chat. But we interviewed Shyam Sankar. So that was fun. That was super fun. He has a new book coming out. Sat down in the New York office, had a nice discussion with him about this book. Shyam is awesome. He's just such a dope guy. And so hopefully people will enjoy that conversation. I think it'll be out later this week. He was like, your hair has changed. I was like, yeah, my hair has indeed changed. But yeah, Palantir got that $1 billion contract. Market didn't really move on this. Honestly, I don't think Palantir can say anything to get the market excited. Right now, they are in the SaaS bucket. They are being seen as a company that A, has a high multiple, B, because they're SaaS, the market is still concerned about them getting commoditized. Although it's harder, I think. I mean, I really don't think the Palantir commoditization by AI argument makes sense. Especially because, like, again, they're not making an LLM, they're orchestrating the implementation of the LLM into the enterprise. However, for those that didn't see this, OpenAI introduced OpenAI Frontier. This was last Friday. If you Command F forward deployed engineer, look at this. We pair OpenAI FDEs. If you've invested in Palantir, you know what that is, with your teams working side by side to help you develop the best practices to build and run agents in production. I mean, they're literally copying Palantir's forward deployed engineer model because it's obviously working. And they're realizing, hey, for OpenAI to win in the enterprise, they're going to have to actually work with enterprises in a meaningful way. So, you know, Palantir got criticized for years about this forward deployed model. If Burry is still upset that he thinks it's consulting, it's like, actually, the biggest AI company, Salesforce started doing this, Microsoft. So like all these companies need these FDEs to meaningfully implement AI. And you get really good margins on it, even if there's a consulting angle to it, because at the end of the day, you're selling software. So yeah, it's a good $1 billion contract, strong for Palantir, but you know, right now the stock, like many growth stocks, are kind of stuck at the moment. But Sham was awesome. I think you guys will enjoy. I drank a Celsius, bro. They put 2 Celsiuses in front. Sham drinks like 5 Celsiuses a day, and I didn't want to be rude, so I drank it with them. We like cheered off to the Celsius, and as I'm drinking it, I'm like, dude, how do people drink this thing? There's no energy that I got from that Celsius. It was like carbonated juice. It wasn't even good, but he loves them. And not just him, everyone at Palantir, like they have fridges and fridges stacked with Celsius. I'm like, I don't get it, dude. He loves those things. He drinks like so many. I'm like, dude, I could barely finish one of them. You only have one post on Instagram. Yeah, I don't really know what to post on Instagram, dude. Like I need to figure out how to post on Instagram. I have one picture of the meetup. I post on my story more often than not. But yeah, I don't really post too much on IG. Probably need to do more of that. Be quiet. I own Celsius. Well, Celsius stock did very well. I think we had a peach. We had like an orange Celsius or something. I was like, Sean, what number is this for you? I think it's like he was like, I think this is my 4th one today. I was like, goodness, bro. Celsius down 1% here, but it was up 9% on Friday. You just post food on Insta and scams. Yeah, please don't respond to any trading emit bot that's out there. I think that's what we got, folks. I think that's what we got. I don't know. I think this could be an ugly week, but I really do think Nvidia is going to be okay. I can obviously see them going down, but maybe downsides of 175 if it gets really ugly. And they are at 175, the multiple is going to get really stupid again, which means it'll get bought up. Until we have a broad-based macro event like Liberation Day, I don't know if these stocks that are already so sold off continue to get sold off that much more, which is the good thing about the starts this year. A lot of stocks are already down so much that maybe they've hit some of their major lows. But then again, stocks don't have to stay flat. They can obviously get hit pretty badly. Is there a chance it's not ugly? Yeah, I really do think if Nvidia comes out and just says, guys, like, relax. It's happening. This AI shit is real. It's not fake. We're more profitable than you can imagine. We have more free cash flow than you can imagine. Our revenue is not going to grow 20% next year. It's going to grow 45%. Like, this is not slowing down. Every single company in the world, every sovereign government in the world needs this infrastructure. We can't make the GPUs fast enough. And I think if Jensen says all of that, we could still dump. But maybe if the numbers back up what he's saying. Remember, we have GTC in March where he's going to introduce even more shit that's bullish around the nature of how AI is going in the future. I think you have a decent setup for March if we take a dump, but I don't think we have to really dump because I think NVIDIA is going to crush. Now, if NVIDIA misses, I don't even want to imagine what's going to happen. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to miss. If we dump, it'll be because like the street's just being like how the street always is, which is that they don't believe it again. So I don't think NVIDIA is going to give them a reason to dump it. I think the street will find their own reason. But realistically, if it stays flat, I don't think that's horrible either. Also, yeah, the USA did win the hockey championship or Olympic or whatever. I really didn't keep up with it, but we beat the Canadians in the finals, right? It was like 2-1 against Canada. Yeah, it was an OT game. Oh, wow. We went into overtime? I didn't even know that. Jack Hughes scores an OT. Team USA wins Olympic gold. Who won the previous Olympic hockey gold medal? Well, it was in 2024, right? The previous one? In the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, the Netherlands won the hockey gold medals? No, maybe I should say winter. Oh, 2022. It had to be Canada, right? Finland? The Canadian women won it, but the men was Finland in 2022. That's field hockey? No, I'm looking at ice hockey. Finland won the men's ice hockey gold medal at the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. By the way, the World Cup is getting ready to happen soon. So that's going to have a lot of implications just in terms of travel across the world as well. The Olympics are every 4 years. Yeah, but the Winter Olympics are every 2 years, right? No, oh no, you're right. They're still every 4 years. Dude, I know nothing about sports. Yeah, that's what I said. The World Cup's happening in Mexico to an extent as well. So like this whole Mexico stuff needs to kind of not be that bad if the World Cup's going to happen. Damn, so the US and Canada got to the finals and the US actually won. Okay, well, there you go. Oh, the USA women also won gold? Dude, I really do not pay attention to the Olympics. I should more if the United States is winning so much. But I was looking at Nvidia's numbers all weekend, trying to make sense of this shit. Hopefully it's better than expected. And it kind of looks Canadian. Do I? Do I look Canadian? Is silver still running? Silver. Yep, silver still running. All right, people are dumping BTC and ETH. They're going to gold and SLV. Silver, look at that, up 4% overnight. Do you remember the last Nvidia earnings? They let us pump, then rug pulled us. It's going to be the same. And the rug pull was ugly too. They let us get to 197 from 180, and then they took us down to 174. That was the start of the November 5% downslide. That was like right before Thanksgiving, or 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I think. So, yeah, I hope that doesn't happen again, but obviously, it definitely could happen. Was that video of a store burning? It was a Costco. No, I don't think it was a Costco. It was like a local grocery store in Mexico. But it was ugly, dude. I mean, this cartel is just like not caring about this. This is like a compilation video of everything that's been happening. This is actually one of the biggest stories of this weekend. I found out about it an hour before going live. I didn't even know what happened. Flights are getting shut. All this stuff is happening there. It was a Costco? It was cars at Costco? Oh, I thought it was a local. Okay, I mean, if it was a Costco, that's even worse. But yeah, I mean, we're going to keep up with this story. Hopefully it's not as bad over the coming days. And a lot of different headlines going back and forth. The Chinese Commerce Ministry, again, they just put out their statement. They want to renegotiate. And now we will enter into this saga of dealing with tariffs over the coming weeks, potentially the coming months. And hopefully it's resolved sooner than later. But got a lot more stuff to navigate now. All right, folks, that's it for me. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Nvidia earnings again this week. Also, Thursday, you're going to have a lot of earnings. SoundHound, Rocket Lab, Duolingo, CoreWeave, MP, Intuit. You got a lot of stuff. Tomorrow, we have HIMS after the bell. HIMS is actually doing it later than expected. HIMS usually is earlier in the earnings cycle. But we have HIMS and Kratos tomorrow. Domino's in the morning. And then Zeta on Tuesday. That's a big one. And then Nvidia, Salesforce, Zoom, IONQ. A lot of those on Wednesday. Snowflake as well. So we'll have a lot of earnings to go through. Yep, Nubank, HP, Navitas, Tempest, Mercado Libre. a lot of those companies this week. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one. Hopefully everyone had a good weekend. We'll be live tomorrow morning. We'll keep going from there. And we'll get ready for Nvidia earnings this week. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Bye, everybody.